Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, November 15th, 2022. Time for both another show and worrying about whether or not my high schooler will make it to the bus on time today. I have no way of telling because we never really know when the bus is coming. But, well, we'll see. Bit of a late morning. But, okay, fingers crossed. Hope all will be okay. Maybe that was him leaving. I don't know. I can't tell anymore. At any rate, 9 o'clock has rolled around, and we're out of time to be able to help with that. So, I hope things all go well today. Okay, well, let's see. Things to catch up on. There are many. It is Tuesday. It's a week since the elections. Most of the counting is done. I guess there's still a few things outstanding to go over, and then the question of whether or not anybody will put up a fight, and if so, for how long, and using what fora, I suppose. And so far it looks like all of the hardcore election deniers who swore that there was A, no way they were going to lose the race, and B, that if they did lose the race, it was obviously evidence of fraud, and C, that they would take it all the way to wherever, the Supreme Court or insurrection, once again, to prove their point, have one by one either lost convincingly and simply conceded, or just are not speaking up in terms of what they plan to do, though they tried riling crowds for a little while. In Arizona, the calls are out. They don't have any legal force, I suppose, but I don't know what the legal authorities are saying about the situation, but they're certainly releasing enough information for the news organizations to say that Katie Hobbs is the winner, and Kari Lake, we are narrowly avoided disaster, thankfully, by electing Katie Hobbs and not putting government in the hands of the chief mean girl of Arizona. She, of course, swore throughout the campaign that if the outcome were such, she would be, who knows what, calling for people to take up arms and march on, where do you march on, I guess at this point? The state capitol, march on Washington, because that's what everybody recognizes as the fun and cool thing to do, and so you don't want to necessarily focus them on something lame like marching in Arizona. But no word yet of the armed insurrection that will attempt to put her in office. Instead, sounds like everybody turns out not to really have been a true believer after all. Unless somebody organized an insurrection and a revolution for them, they weren't willing to put up the fight that they claimed they were going to, and good. I'm glad that they're not going to do that. Meanwhile, more and more people turning to this thesis, this hypothesis of how COVID changed the midterm elections. Of course, Charles Gable, as he has approached this subject, he has done so with a great deal of caution, because I don't know if there's data or who knows what. There may be no ability to interpret the data that we're ever going to get that will make this a conclusive statement. But it certainly appears, well, the makings of a thesis are there, that COVID-19 rampaging harder as it did through red areas because of vaccine avoidance, vaccine hesitancy, mask resistance, denialism, a combination of all three, and maybe some other things that we didn't even think of that had to do with the way people approached the pandemic. We've known for a long time that the damage done was significantly higher among people, obviously, who weren't going to take precautions against the disease, and as it happens, their politics tended to lean red and tended to lean MAGA red at that. And then when the death toll came due, those people weren't around to cast ballots. Now, remember that these are very frequently also people who will cast ballots for their dead relatives, but in some cases, spouses too were all dead, and, these communities were hit pretty hard. So I've seen the theory floated, and I've seen it hedged as well when floated, and sometimes it's just floated outright. As a matter of fact, what I have in front of me this morning, because that's the way things work, I still turn on Twitter in the morning, and we'll have to get used to not doing that. But because I did, Truro Renfro has put in front of me this piece from, I don't even recognize where we're reading from, the E-News Park Forest. Serving a great American town, their tagline says, Park Forest, Illinois. What do we make of this? I don't know, but it's in front of me, and it's printed. So we'll read it. Gary Kopisinski, perhaps. I think I may have mangled that one. Has written this opinion piece, an opinion blog post, as a matter of fact. Vaccine hesitancy, says Gary anyway, probably cost Republicans the midterms. Now, it's illustrated with a photo of Neil deGrasse Tyson, which makes us think that there is scientific validity already to this theory. We don't really know that, but we're willing to say that there is some. Add COVID-19, says Gary, to the long list of reasons there was no, quote, red wave in the midterms. Nary a red breeze. Neil deGrasse Tyson, an astrophysicist, cosmologist, not a cosmetologist, though he could certainly be a success there as well, I'm sure. Astrophysicist, cosmologist, referenced vaccine hesitancy, that's the terms he used for it, in observing that a higher number of COVID-19 deaths among conservatives may have cost Republicans the midterm. So if you were speculating in this area, and you are a person who respects Neil deGrasse Tyson, then you're in good shape. Everything's working well for you. My phone, by the way, beeping at me that the bus is approaching, so my fingers are crossed that that noise we heard was, in fact, my son leaving the house and heading to the bus stop. Although how he got himself dressed and washed in enough time to get out the door, I have no idea. Good luck to you. Anyway, Dr. Tyson, what did you have to tell us about your theory about COVID-19 and how it may have affected the midterm elections? Well, he made the observation on Twitter, which may or may not be something he's planning to stop doing soon. Vaccine hesitancy, which was much higher among Republican voters than Democrats during COVID, led to disproportionate deaths among conservatives. I think that we've proven, and may have cost them the midterm elections in close races. And I mean, it's not difficult to come to that conclusion, and it's not difficult to support it either. I mean, obviously the impact, if they're dead, they're not supposed to be casting ballots. If it's disproportionately among Republicans, you know, it will affect things, but the question is, can it really, I mean, were the numbers great enough to affect the outcome of elections? But when you look closely at things, and if you look at it with some caution, you have to say the margins, of course, have to be very, very close in order for you to be able to definitively say that the deaths from COVID-19 are what cost people the election. It could be there are ripple effects as well. The deaths may occasionally have woken people up to the reality of the situation, and they might. The survivors who are also of voting age might have said, I feel poorly served by the Republican representatives of the area who told me that COVID-19 was not a threat and has in fact killed my spouse, significant other, parent, aunt, uncle, relative of some kind, close friend, bowling partner, whatever it may be. But I have a feeling that more people actually died from it than actually changed their minds about it, even when people close to them died. But I don't know. There wasn't a great deal of coverage of people who changed their minds. There were occasional stories. That was a very popular feature story, to be sure. But, you know, there should have been millions more, and we didn't see that. Anyway, in his tweet, Dr. Tyson referenced an article on Political Wire, something I commented on yesterday on Twitter as well. COVID deaths probably cost Republicans the midterms. The article says in part, and here, I don't know, are they citing just the Political Wire? Yeah, the Political Wire blurb on the article. as opposed to the original article. But anyway, they usually borrow from that. Jonathan Last. I don't know who Jonathan Last is, but we'll add him to the Jonathan Corners here. He says, so again, lots of factors were at play, including one that doesn't get talked about much, except here, excess COVID deaths. There's been an ongoing study of the Republican resistance to the COVID vaccines, and the preliminary findings suggest that post-vaccine, Republicans accounted for about 80% more of the excess deaths than Democrats. Part of this is because of vaccine hesitancy. Part of it is because of the age profile of voters. That's true, too. I'm not going to burden you with the math here. I guess this is still Jonathan Last. But if you want to read up on it, the data is quite striking all the way to the county level. And we know about that. And what our friend Brain Rap, a.k.a. Charles Gaba, has been doing. And he's been doing the data down to the county level. And I imagine thinking about taking it even further. But at any rate, it is pretty specific. To take just one example, I guess Jonathan Last still speaking here. Between January 2021 and this month, 9,400 people in Nevada died of COVID. The data suggests that the majority of these people would have been Republican voters. Keep that number in mind, as of course they head to the, well, now not to the polls, but to the counting rooms, and possibly find out that there were races, statewide races, decided by fewer than 94 or 80% of 9,400 people. Anyway, the number crunching was done by the Pew Research Center, says our commenter here, Gary Kopasinski. And we're back with him here. The number crunching was done by Pew Research Center, which says the following regarding how they arrived at their conclusions. Pew Research Center conducted this analysis to understand how the geography of the coronavirus outbreak has changed over its course. For this analysis, we relied on official reports of deaths attributed to the novel coronavirus collected and maintained by the New York Times, which is already a problem, say conservatives. The estimates provided in this report are subject to several sources of error. There may be significant differences between the true number of deaths due to COVID-19 and the official reported counts of those deaths. There may also be variation across the states in the quality and types of data reported. That's almost certainly the case. For example, most states report deaths based on the residency of the deceased person rather than the location where they died. The New York Times collects data from many different local health agencies, and this likely leads to some additional measurement error. This analysis relies on county-level data. Counties in the United States vary widely in their population sizes, so in many places in the essay we divide counties into approximately equal-sized groups in terms of their population for comparability, or report on population-adjusted death rates rather than total counts of deaths. All right, so there you have it. I don't know. People are working on it, trying to make it scientifically bulletproof. And see if they can, in fact, prove the impact of COVID-19 on the voting rates. And we all sort of, silently, some less silently than others, hoped that it would happen, I think. It's terrible to admit that. But, I mean, I guess that was the accountability moment, the only kind of accountability moment you can call for when you're screwing around with a deadly disease. And, by the way, spreading it, or at least enabling it to spread to other people who take it quite seriously and are doing everything they can to avoid it. The accountability moment really kind of has to include you getting the disease and risking death. And while you're at it, the other thing that's very important to you, getting your way politically by having greater numbers or convincing greater numbers of people to adopt your point of view, and then surviving to go to the polls. That's part of the strategy that's usually unstated. But when there's a global pandemic that kills 1 million plus Americans, maybe you should have taken it more seriously is all I can tell you. All right, let's see. Many other stories parked here in Pocket. We're going to have to get Armando at some point to find some time for us and come back to discuss the emoluments question. We've never stopped discussing the emoluments question, but guess what? It turns out that the rest of the world is now sort of ready to acknowledge that maybe there was an emoluments problem. The New York Times reporting yesterday that under this headline, documents detail foreign government spending at Trump Hotel, which, I feel like, isn't that duh? At this point, we all know that, and we've even seen similar documents, but, this is what it takes for the rest of the world sometimes to wake up to the news. 6 nations, and not the Indian Confederacy, but 6 nations spent lavishly at the hotel, the Trump Hotel, during periods when they were seeking to influence the Trump administration, according to a breakdown released by the House Oversight Committee. By the way, you won't know this, you won't be able to perceive this, but I feel a cold breeze across my back that suggests that perhaps the front door bounced back open when our high schooler left to catch the bus today. So at the break, I'm going to go and see if my front door has been open for half an hour. Anyway, but such is my dedication to reading you the news. Right, so where were we? 6 nations spent lavishly at the Trump Hotel when they were seeking to influence the Trump administration. According to, which documents are these? A breakdown released by the House Oversight Committee. And by the way, we'll sorely miss the current chair of the committee, Carolyn Maloney, who did a fantastic job running the place. And while we're on the task over the past couple of days, Democrats generally, of criticizing redistricting in the state of New York, she was a casualty of the redistricting, thrown into a common district with Jerry Nadler, and very difficult to choose which of the two of them has been the more valuable in pursuing accountability for Trump and the Trump administration. So, salute to Carolyn Maloney, who had a long and successful congressional career, but she won't be around to kick around the rotting corpse of Donald Trump anymore, which is too bad. But since there won't be a state funeral, we don't have to worry about her missing out on anything exciting later on. At any rate, here's the report of the report. We'll say officials from 6 nations spent more than $750,000 at former President Donald J. Trump's hotel in Washington when they were seeking to influence his administration, renting rooms for more than $10,000 per night, according to documents that his former accounting firm turned over to Congress. And I got to tell you, my initial impression is I am hoping that what they mean here, and I don't think there's any other way given how much money was spent, they mean that there were 6 countries that they could identify that spent $750,000 or more during periods in which they were trying to influence the Trump administration. And honestly, I don't even know, like $750,000 seems like a low amount of money in terms of trying to bribe Donald Trump. You would think that he would insist on $1 million profit at minimum, but he'll take it where he can get it. I don't think he turns his nose up at free money when people are trying to boost his ego. But certainly $750,000. Were it the total, you'd have a hard time convincing people that it was particularly influential. But here's the rest of the story, and perhaps the mystery will be solved. The governments of Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and China spent more money than previously known at the Trump International Hotel at crucial times in 2017 and 18 for those countries, crucial times, I guess we should say, for those countries' relations with the United States, according to these documents, which were obtained by the House Oversight Committee and released on Monday. The officials spent freely at the hotel, the records show. And by the way, a note for the record, these are all, except for China, I believe they're all Muslim countries, and he was collecting all this money, and I don't know how much extra special treatment they got at his behest, whether with or without the bribes. But this was, of course, while he's out there saying, we can't have any Muslims coming to this country. It should be a total ban until we know what the hell is going on here. With the exception of very rich Arabs who can bribe their way into anything that he's got to offer because they have a pile of money. But other countries too, Turkey, he's friendly with because of their autocratic leader. Malaysia, you don't hear a great deal about, but, they were willing to spend, so it made Trump happy, and he was somehow less concerned about the threats, whatever he thought, or whatever he perceived them to be from Muslim people around the world, suddenly went away when they came around with a pile of money. Okay. Well, at any rate, they all spent this money at crucial times during the periods in 2017 and 18, according to the House Oversight Committee. The officials spent freely at the hotel, the records show. The Malaysian Prime Minister, for instance, hired a $1,500 personal trainer during his stay at the Trump Hotel in 2017. The Saudi Ministry of Defense rented several suites, each costing $10,500, with rooms reserved under the name His Excellency. How excellent. Qatari officials, or Qatari, I'll see if we can pronounce that correctly. Atari, basically, is what I'm saying here. Officials from that country that starts with a Q that everybody knows you can say one way or another. Officials spent more than $300,000 there in the weeks leading up to a meeting with Mr. Trump in 2018. The documents build on the public record of how Mr. Trump's hotel brought in millions during his presidency from foreign governments. The Oversight Committee had previously estimated that the hotel received more than $3.75 million from foreign governments between 2017 and 2020, raising concerns about possible violations of the Constitution's Foreign Emoluments Clause. Possible violations? It's straight up, right in your face, violative of the Foreign Emoluments Clause. But, definitions can mean anything, as perhaps you'll see in some of the other stories, still waiting in pocket, describing the goings-on in various legal cases where anything goes for Trump lawyers. The new documents cover only a period of months, but they provide a revealing window into how foreign governments spent heavily at the hotel during key months when they were trying to influence Mr. Trump's administration. The documents also show that Republican lobbyists working on behalf of those countries, some operating without registering as foreign agents, by the way, and some people actually being prosecuted finally for that as well, as required by law. Some of them spent tens of thousands more at the Trump Hotel during the same periods. It paints an extremely troubling picture, Representative Carolyn B. Maloney, Democrat of New York, and the chairwoman of the committee said in an interview. It paints a picture of a facial violation of the Emoluments Clause. So, there's that. She added that the documents sharply call into question the extent to which President Trump was guided by his personal financial interest while in office, rather than the best interest of the American people. Which is, of course, the whole point of the Emoluments Clause. The real tragedy of this episode is that we've once again learned that things that just have never been done because, it says right in the Constitution you can't do them. We realize, hey, what happens if somebody does do them? It doesn't say. It doesn't say what we're supposed to do. Do you impeach him? Do you arrest him? Do you take all his money away? Do you punch him in the face? What happens? Nobody knows. And so it turns out the answer is we stand around looking at each other and produce government reports detailing the information and then condemning it vigorously in the press and then reading about it on radio shows and podcasts. That's kind of all there is to it. Eric Trump, I don't know why you would ask him about it, but when he was asked about the spending by these government officials, he's nominally in charge of the business, said on Monday that any profit the family company earned on the hotel stays was returned to the federal government through a voluntary annual payment to the Treasury Department. I mean, they don't have any paperwork proving that they did that, but he is going to stand there and say that. As a company, we went to tremendous lengths to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest. Well, they haven't, because there appears to be a conflict of interest right here. So, I mean, you may have gone to tremendous lengths and failed, but I don't know. That's not what he's going to say in this. So, as a company went to tremendous lengths to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest, Eric Trump said in a statement, not due to any legal requirement, yes it is, but because of the respect we have towards the office of the presidency, and of course the plain language of the Constitution of the United States, which we don't respect. Last month, the committee released records showing that the Secret Service had paid, the Secret Service too. I forgot all about what they were contributing to all this. The Secret Service had paid more than $1.4 million to Trump hotel properties since Trump took office in 2017 and had charged as much as $1,185 per night for hotel rooms used by agents protecting the president and his family. The committee disclosed the latest documents as it released a letter from Ms. Maloney to the National Archives, remember them, seeking additional documents about the Trump Hotel and communications with foreign governments. The National Archives confirmed on Monday that it had received the letter. They kept track of this letter. Ms. Maloney said the additional documents were needed to determine whether former President Trump distorted U.S. foreign policy to serve his own financial interests at the expense of the American people and in violation of his oath of office. The answer is yes, but he's not in office, so what are you going to do? He's running for office again, and you'll say, that dirty rat, he shouldn't do that, and, some people will vote for him and some people won't. And then we'll all look around and say, I don't know, I thought the Constitution was more robust than that. The documents released on Monday show that in September of 2017, Mr. Trump welcomed Najib Razak, the Prime Minister of Malaysia at the time, and he welcomed him to the White House when Mr. Razak and members of his family were under investigation by the Justice Department, apparently for something else along the way. And he thought it might be a good idea to enrich Donald Trump and see if he could make his charges go away, I guess. Mr. Razak and his entourage spent at least $259,000 at the Trump Hotel. Mr. Trump praised the Malaysian leader, thanking him for all the investment you've made in the United States, including me in my pocket. Among the services the Malaysians paid for, well, why don't we come back after this and I can go check the door and we'll shock you with the horrifying details of the Malaysian stay at the Trump Hotel. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I see that, here's another distraction we'll have to deal with later on. Let me put this thing aside, although the Twitter app has never been particularly helpful for putting these things aside for some reason. Okay, anyway, let's jump back to the New York Times article about the new documentation of the foreign emoluments paid to and accepted by Trump and his family in violation of the Constitution. But hey, what are you going to do about it? Some of the shocking detail, at this point, I don't know how shocking it is. What did the Malaysian delegation pay for in order to spend money and line Donald Trump's pockets at the Trump International Hotel while they were getting ready for their big meeting with Trump at the White House? Well, there were more than $9,000 paid for delegation coffee breaks. Now, I don't know how many people were in a delegation. I don't know how much coffee they drink. I don't know what they put in their coffee. But okay, $9,000 on coffee breaks. More than $8,000 for 3 in-room lunches. Again, I don't know what they eat. I don't know how many people they were feeding. They could have big rooms. And a $1,500 charge, of course, for the personal trainer for the prime minister who stayed in the hotel's $10,000 a night presidential suite. The documents also show I'm shocked at all this, that Elliot Broidy, remember that guy? The vice chairman of the Trump Victory Committee, by the way, there was no victory, who at the time was also the vice chairman of the Republican National Committee, stayed at the hotel for 4 nights during the Malaysian delegation's visit and spent more than $5,000 while he was there. Broidy later pleaded guilty to conspiracy to violate the foreign lobbying laws as part of a covert campaign to persuade Trump and the Justice Department to drop the investigation of the Prime Minister and his family, who were under investigation here. And it appears to have been the prime motivation for the trip, though I'm sure they said, yes, let's expand trade between the countries. So, in addition to the Malaysian first family, maybe, I don't know if people call that when they're talking prime ministers or not. Maybe they have a ceremonial president who's the first family, head of the first family. At any rate, Elliot Broidy is, his total is included because he was illegally, lobbying for the prime minister and the Malaysian government at that point. Okay. Broidy later pleaded guilty to the conspiracy to violate the foreign lobbying laws, right, as part of the campaign to persuade Trump and the Justice Department to drop the investigation. How did that campaign go? I don't know if that is included in here. White House officials denied at the time that Mr. Najib had picked the hotel at Mr. Trump's behest. You might even believe that. I mean, why wouldn't he be able to figure that out by himself? I don't know that they needed to communicate to them that they should stay at the Trump Hotel in order to catch Trump's attention and put money in his pocket. But anyway, we certainly don't book their hotel accommodations. The press secretary, which was at the time Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who of course has recently been elected governor of Arkansas. So that's good news for you down there in Arkansas. The cover-up handled by your new governor. Also that year, after Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates severed ties with Qatar, igniting a regional crisis, all 3 governments spent hundreds of thousands of dollars at the Trump Hotel while lobbying the administration. From late 2017 through mid-2018, government officials from Saudi Arabia and the Emirates spent at least $164,000 at the Trump Hotel, while Qatari officials and connected companies spent at least $307,000, the Oversight Committee found. So they spent more money, and lo and behold, everything was kind of settled in their favor in the end. From March 7th, 2018 to March 14th, 2018, so for a week or so, the Saudi Ministry of Defense spent more than $85,000, including renting several $10,500 suites. 2 officials who stayed there were referred to as His Excellency, indicating that the Saudi royal family or senior government ministers were patronizing the Trump Hotel, or at least trying to make it look like they did. On March 20th, 2018, Mr. Trump met with Mohammed bin Salman, Mr. Bonesaw as we know him, the Saud crown prince and de facto ruler, an owner of an entire country, or what we call a country, but is really just a large familial compound, apparently, who at the same time was also serving as defense minister, by the way, at the White House. So why did the defense ministry spend that money? Because that was MBS's official post at the time, defense minister. 2 days later, the White House approved $1.3 billion in arms sales to the Saudi government. The records released by House investigators also show a total of $65,139 in charges by the American Turkish Council, a non-profit group with ties to the Turkish government. The council helped sponsor 2 conferences held at the Trump Hotel in Washington in 2017 and 2019 at around the same time that, ready for this, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey, more or less his name, pushed Mr. Trump and his aides to shut down an investigation into sanctions violations by a state-owned Turkish bank. The Embassy of Turkey delegation and the Embassy of Turkey also had billing records at the hotel. That's interesting. Embassy of Turkey delegation and Embassy of Turkey, as though they were different entities, had billing records at the hotel, but no details on the amounts paid. By the way, while I have your attention, I did see over the weekend on Twitter, Maybe I can make a note to myself to find the things. But I think I saw over the weekend that the current Biden White House, the official statements from the press secretary, the White House press secretary, included a new and updated spelling of the name of the country, Turkey. And what better time to do this than at Thanksgiving, really, when it causes so much titillation among the youngsters. I don't know. That's not really it. Or I guess I should say tittering among the youngsters, which feels like it's the same root as titillation, but I suppose it has a different connotation. And we don't want to talk about titillation when it comes to youngsters, right? So forget all of that. But I think, it always raises eyebrows. And I'm going to teach the kids about the name of the country, Turkey. Anyway, I think it looks like maybe the embassy, and the government of Turkey may be perhaps encouraging English speakers to adopt a new spelling of the country, which is something along the lines of closer to what I guess you would pronounce as Turkey, having that little extra syllable at the end, which is undoubtedly a little closer to how they actually pronounce the name of their own damn country, and they can change the name of it if they want to, and the spelling too. And at any rate, but using this spelling of Turkiye is what I think it looks like, as I recall, in English. And I think there's a little umlaut over the U in Turkey. But undoubtedly, I guess, my thinking is that that's how they've always pronounced and spelled the name of the country. And because American and other English speakers have difficulty with that extra syllable and the different vowel sounds, they're just like, well, it sounds an awful lot like Turkey. So we have a word, Turkey. We'll just use that as the name of the country. And then if you beat them in a bunch of wars, you say, I don't really care how they think they spell it. We're going to spell it this way. And predictably enough, in using that, there was conservative backlash laughing, outright at the press secretary for quote unquote misspelling the name of the country. And it was like, well, I actually spelled it right. But anyway, now we expect the usual resistance, changing Peking to Beijing, and how dare you, Bombay to Mumbai, and et cetera, et cetera. And they always resist this stuff, the latest one being Kiev to Kyiv. And I like it because I always like the information about, you should be pronouncing it this way. This is how it's said. And you should just learn to be able to form those vowels and do it. But anyway, I just noticed that over the weekend, and I think that's a nice development always. Even if everything else is garbage and brutality, we'll take this little linguistic lesson as a bright light among the darkness. At any rate, among the other things that they did here, they used the old spelling of the name Turkey in designating these billing accounts at the Trump Hotel. Now, records from Mazars USA, the longtime accounting firm for Mr. Trump that cut ties with him and his family business this year because lawsuits, also showed $19,370 in spending by a delegation from the Embassy of China, which has not changed the spelling of its name, at the Trump Hotel in late August 2017, 2 months before Trump traveled to the country. The Trump Organization wrote checks to the Treasury Department totaling $355,687, covering profits at its hotels during the first 3 years of Trump's tenure at the White House, but it never provided a breakdown of which foreign government officials had stayed at its hotels. They basically just said Eric's whole spiel about we gave that money to the Treasury is here's a check for $355,000, which great, whatever. This represents all the money that foreign governments have spent at the hotel. And everybody said, everybody used probably Greg's formulation of things. That's bullshit. It's absolutely bull. I can't make that noise myself, but almost certainly the case that didn't cover the amount. And of course, now these documents prove that it probably didn't even cover the amount that any one particular government spent during that time at the Trump Hotel, let alone all 6 of them. The House Oversight Committee, after a years-long fight, recently entered into a legal settlement with Mazars, in which the firm agreed to produce a range of financial documents from several years before Trump took office and during his early presidency. Mazars said in February that it could no longer stand behind a full decade of annual financial statements that it had prepared for the Trump organization. So that's where we now stand on the emoluments question. And basically, I'm sure, Armando spent a good portion of the day just beside himself with outrage that there could still be people who are waking up to this fact. But, that's one of his favorite hobbies, of course, is being beside himself with outrage, and mine too, so I can understand it. So it must have been a good day for him, and maybe we can visit with him sometime in the balance of the week here. He offered right away as soon as we were talking about this yesterday, and I didn't follow up because I was busy with so many other things, and so I didn't get anything scheduled, and I felt bad, and I don't want to surprise him and say, you got to come. As soon as at the drop of my hat, you have to show up. But maybe we can schedule something. Plus, of course, later on today, when he might have showed up during the later segments, we'll have Joan available, and we don't want to overlap them and schedule them in conflict. So perhaps on another day. And that gives us a chance, of course, to dive into another story that he may also want to touch on, and he'll have opportunity to do that later. I mentioned that there were some legal cases during or in the middle of which, or in the adjudication of which, we find that once again the Trump lawyers freely defining problems away or making let's say novel claims about how you should regard certain otherwise well settled legal concepts totally differently and in favor of the Trump team here. In this case, the reporting of The Hill, I have from Rebecca Beach, who reports under this headline, Trump pushes special master, that would of course be for the Mar-a-Lago documents case, pushes special master to deem Mar-a-Lago records his personal property. How do you like that play? You can't prosecute me for having my own personal property stored in the basement of Mar-a-Lago. I mean, unless that personal property is people I've kidnapped for sexual abuse or, other sorts of things that he might have in his basement. That's not fair for you to call that your personal property. Neither is it fair to have him attempt to call government records personal property, but that's what he's trying to do. Here's the gist of it. Then President Trump designated presidential records as personal records simply by packing them up and taking them to Mar-a-Lago. His lawyers wrote in a newly unsealed court document, or rather several newly unsealed court documents, plural, a one-off from the shaky legal theory that the president can declassify documents merely by thinking about them as being declassified. Which is not really a workable solution for anything, but has a kernel of truth in there somewhere. Now they figure, well, since people recognize the kernel of truth there, mostly because we kept repeating it and insisting that it was a kernel of truth, whether it was or wasn't, we now can do the same thing here. If you're not sure whether these records are personal records or presidential records, why don't we have the president declare them to be personal? And the kernel of truth in there is that when you are leaving the White House and taking records or packing up documents for sorting or having the NARA personnel help you with it, there is an opportunity to declare, to make a determination on your own behalf. But, it's challengeable if necessary, but usually it's not, because actual honest people usually engage in this process. But there's an opportunity to say, well, okay, this is a record that I have in my possession while I was president, but it's my personal, this is my favorite orders at Olive Garden, and it's not really necessary for NARA to archive those things, and everybody might then review the document and agree that that's what it is and say, yeah, you can take it with you. This is my Christmas list, not for cards that were sent at government expense, but individual gifts that I gave to my family. Well, that seems like a personal record. You can take that too. And there's a process under which the president or personnel acting on behalf of the president will sort through things and say, this is really personal. And if all parties agree, it just settles the issue. Now, if there's disagreement, it's not the case that because the president says, well, I feel that it's personal, that's the end of the question. But that's their argument. A series of documents filed over the weekend, along with others unsealed Monday, offer the latest glimpse into Trump's battle to shield records from the Department of Justice, include new evidence from the DOJ that he appeared to have handled the classified records on his property after leaving office. That's a second separate question that is addressed by these pleadings and by the investigation itself, which wanted to evaluate the possible claim by Trump's team that he had no knowledge that they were, in fact, that there were classified documents that were in his possession. It was packed up in a whirlwind of activity at the end of his administration following the insurrection. And you can hardly blame us for being distracted after trying to overthrow the federal government, right? And so I don't know what I took. It doesn't matter. We packed it all in boxes, and at worst, it sat in boxes here until you guys discovered it was missing. Then we searched around, we found it, and we gave it to you. It's undoubtedly the case that I had no idea personally of the presence of these things, and even if I did, I would never have manipulated them or taken them out and shown them around at Mar-a-Lago or offered to sell them to other people around the world or anything like that. But as it turns out, there's evidence that he did just that he had to have known what he had in his possession after leaving the White House, because there's evidence of that, evidence that he was manipulating the documents and using them, taking them out and moving them around after he left the White House. So, how so? Let's see. The filing argues that the determination of whether records created during a president's term are their personal property is largely up to the president. That is to say, that's the argument of the Trump team, that the determination of whether records created during a presidency are personal or governmental are largely up to the president. And in the first instance, they very often are. And they usually take pains to err on the side of caution and give the NARA archivists the opportunity to dispute things if they feel it's necessary. But that wasn't the case here. They're just relying on prior administration's good faith efforts to sort documents out. The fact that that has happened in the past must mean that you need to give the same good faith deference to the Trump administration, except, they've never earned it on anything. And in hindsight, it appears you've ended up with a tremendous amount of highly sensitive material that you've been manipulating and using since leaving office. So, anyway, the pleadings say President Trump was still serving his term in office when the documents at issue were packed, transported, and delivered to his residence at Palm Beach, Florida, which just means that as president, he was violating, usual classified information protocol by taking it out of secure facilities and shipping it to his residence. That's a violation in and of itself. But, you could say, well, but he was the president of the United States. And that means, I think, really should be interpreted to mean, well, yes, that means we, as per DOJ policy, we can't indict you for it while you're sitting as president. But later, when you're not, we should feel free to do so. But this is the argument. Trump was still serving as president when the documents at issue were packed, transported, and delivered to Mar-a-Lago. Thus, when he made a designation decision, he was president of the United States. His decision to retain certain records as personal is entitled to deference. It's not. And the records in question are thus presumptively personal. Trump's lawyers wrote in a brief. Now, they may be right from a legal standpoint, because again, the laws were written at a time when nobody contemplated just outright BS on things like this from the president, although increasingly we grew to believe that was a possibility, that politically motivated claims of, whether of declassification or of the personal nature, it became pretty obvious in the George W. Bush administration that they were going to take advantage of the legal presumptions. By the time the Trump administration rolled around, those things were largely destroyed anyway, and Trump's personal reputation for this stuff certainly argues against any assumption of good faith and opens the door to questioning any ordinary deference given to a presidency. But that's not how courts will see it. Courts will say, he occupies the presidency regardless of what we really know about the person himself. So we've got to put it through the ringer and test these claims. But even so, the claims that they're making are well beyond the kind of deference prior administrations have gotten. It was never the case that a simple declaration in the face of all evidence to the contrary would be enough to overcome any presumptions at all, much less turn off an investigation. The fact that they've found these highly sensitive, highly classified documents in his residence, having been manipulated by him, by the way, after he was out of the presidency, which is a whole separate issue, argues against the deference. We could give you that deference. It's just that the deference is defeated. We'll grant you at the outset the same deference as any president, but all deference claims are subject to inquiry. Most of them don't get past the initial stages of inquiry because there's not enough evidence to overcome the presumptions that are built into the law. But in your case, the fact that we found you with those classified documents in your desk drawer at your private sex club / residence is enough to overcome the presumption. Well, we don't have to presume anything. We see what you've been doing with these things. But they have to make those arguments nonetheless. The Justice Department countered, by the way, that Trump cannot decide a record is his personal property simply by saying so. Such an interpretation of the Presidential Records Act, it wrote, would nullify the statute's entire purpose. Right. The filing comes as Trump pushes to keep more than 10,000 documents from the Justice Department, a tranche that remains after records marked as classified were returned to the DOJ. The special master assigned to review the documents, Judge Raymond Deary, asked both sides to suggest guidelines for determining which records should be turned over. Trump's lawyers went on to argue, this gets interesting, he should not have to prove that he designated the documents as personal, echoing similar arguments made after Trump claimed he declassified records stored at his Florida home. So again, another parallel between classification and the personal versus presidential records question. They think both can be solved by mere thoughts of an acting president, and they can't. But in addition to that, they also think that, the big problem is, well, these presumptions are subject to test in court. And so their way of getting around that fact is to say, well, our argument is actually that there should be no test and that there need be no test because Trump, the president, and whether as president or former president, shouldn't have to prove that he was in compliance with the law. You should just take his word for it. Why? Because isn't a very good answer. Do you have anything more serious than that? Well, we feel that the law says that we should not have to have anything more seriously than that. Why do you say that? Because we do. Well, but on what basis do you say that? Well, we don't believe that you should be allowed to ask what basis we say that on. Well, now we're just going in circles. Yes, but we also don't believe that you should be allowed to say that we're going in circles because it's our feeling that we're not. The president believes and did believe when he was in office that this was a straight line. That's exactly what they're saying. We shouldn't have to tell you that. Why not? Because we shouldn't. Why do you think you shouldn't? Well, we also shouldn't have to tell you why we think we shouldn't have to tell you what we don't have to tell you. Over and over and over. So, I mean, they'll sort through it, but this is the kind of stuff we have to waste our time with while waiting for the Department of Justice to come to the decision on whether or not they're actually going to charge the guy. We don't think you should be allowed to charge him because we say so. And we say so because we don't think we should be required to prove why we believe things. And we'll now litigate the question of whether or not you need to tell us why, or whether or not you believe what you're telling the court. Why should we have to prove that what we tell to the court is true? Well, that's the nature of court. Well, but it's the nature of the presidency that we shouldn't have to prove anything. No, it isn't. Well, we think it is. And there's really no reason why we should have to prove to you that it isn't, or is or isn't. We say it is, you say it isn't. We shouldn't have to prove it. You should have to prove it. Okay. Well, at any rate, back to the Hill's reporting here. In other words, it is the president's designation, their argument is, not the appearance or content of a given document, that is determinative. It says it's classified, it's full of classified information, but the president's designation, even if he only imagines it, is what's determinative in their minds. President Trump need not put forth documentary evidence of his designation decisions because his conduct unequivocally confirmed that he was treating the materials in question as personal records rather than presidential records. It's the exact parallel of the declassification argument, that simply by imagining that something was declassified, it was. How would anybody and the rest of the government know that it was declassified and begin treating it that way? And the answer is, that's your problem, not mine. What's determinative of classification is what the president imagines about classification. Similarly, what the president imagines about personal property is the answer on personal property. And the fact that you don't know that and can't act in accordance with it until he tells you is your problem. It sounds like a you problem, not a me problem, and it should work exactly the same way, which is to say, he should lose on both. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Boy, there's a lot to keep up with. There's still more to this Hill article. I know I've been getting sidetracked in commenting about how extremely dumb this is, but they do sum it up nicely. The Justice Department called this argument that the Trump team was offering a shell game, because it is, with Trump hoping to fall back on claims that the documents are protected by executive privilege if it fails. So there's actually two different shell games going on here. The first is just layer upon layer. What are the variant I would just call the layer upon layer fallacy, I guess, in which you say, right, these documents are personal, not presidential. What makes you say that? Well, what determines it is what the president thinks about the documents. What? No, it isn't. Says who? Well, we shouldn't have to show you the authority that we rely on to make that claim, because what's determinative here is what we just said was determinative. And it's really unfair to ask us to prove that we have the authority to imagine things into becoming personal property. That's really your job, to prove that we don't have it. No, it isn't. That's not right. Where do you find the authority to claim that it's our job to offer this proof and it's not yours? Well, again, that's not something we have to tell you, because it's your job to prove stuff, not ours. No, that's not right. I mean, it's just not. And you just do this over and over again. Well, what makes you say that it's our job to prove that we have to prove things? Well, we don't have to tell you that either, because it's your job to prove that you are the ones that have to prove that you're the ones that have to prove that you're the ones that have to prove that we don't have to prove the thing. You see? This is so easy. If you can just follow along here, you'll have a lot easier time. But this is what they said about the classification of documents, and they just layer one more layer on top of it. Why do you argue this? What are you talking about? Where does this even come from? And the answer is, we don't have to tell you. And once you accept that as a premise, I mean, we don't accept it as a premise. They do. I don't see how they get out of that. That's a feedback loop. They just go around in circles. They've screwed up their own brains there. And they're now stuck with that as the argument. But there's a second layer of shell game. When DOJ talks about the shell game, they're talking about this one, which is, all right, supposing the judge says, enough of this nonsense. We can't keep going around in circles with you pretending you don't have to prove anything. I'm the judge and I say you do have to prove something, so prove it. Well, we can't. All right, well then that's dispensed with, and these are not personal records. They are, as the National Archives and Records Administration personnel say, presidential records, and you got to give them back. Well, now wait a second. While it's true we lost on the designation of these records as personal, we have another argument. We have a pleading in the alternative, and it is permissible to plead something else, a totally different theory, even when that theory contradicts entirely your first theory. But this is a very extreme case of contradicting your first theory. And so at the minimum, even if you're allowed to present these arguments in tandem, we should point out how ridiculous it's going to look. Government attorneys, of course, agree that this is problematic. They call it, as I said, the shell game. The game here is, if you don't believe that the president's brain alone can designate these documents as personal, then we will claim executive privilege for these documents. Now, see what they're trying to do here is, you're trying to say you can't have these documents and you can't take them from us because they are personal in nature and not presidential in nature. Whether that's my Christmas shopping list or whether it's which countries want to bribe me, whatever it is. No, those are personal, not government. The government should have no interest in them whatsoever. Well, you've lost that argument, so the government is taking them. Not so fast. You can't take them because they are, in fact, so governmental in nature that they are subject to executive privilege. Because they were created when I was president of the United States and they involve official business, and you cannot have them. They are executive privilege. But you just said they were totally personal in nature and that you declared them. Your claim was that you used your vast mind powers to declare them personal in nature. Ah, yes, but I lost on that. And so now I'm going to say they're extremely governmental in nature, which of course would only mean that you were not allowed to take them initially from the White House to Mar-a-Lago because they were so official in nature. Ah, yes, but they were official in nature at one point, but then I declassified them and rendered them personal property. But then you said that they were back to being government property, and so in that case, we'd like them to be privileged executive, presidential, governmental property. And of course, there's tests for that too. You can't just say something is protected by executive privilege because you say so if the government or whoever the prosecuting authority may be says, well, there's evidence that we'd like to present to the court to show that this is that the claim of executive privilege is a sham. He's just looking to shield these damaging documents from public view by claiming that it's official business and executive privilege when it is in fact a bribe list. And that will cause problems of its own. And they're attempting to do both, which is really interesting. So there you go. Government attorneys wrote that these two different pleadings are essentially the exact opposite of each other. Plaintiff has indicated that he asserts executive privilege only if the special master rejects his first assertion that a document is a personal record, and determines that it is a presidential record, right? So if the president, or if Trump says, special master Dearie, this is a personal document, not a presidential record. And if the special master says, no, you're wrong, it is a presidential record, then the plan is to say, well, in that case, executive privilege. Pretty interesting. That is a shell game, and a special master should not indulge it. Although I guess it's possible that you could come up with such a document. I don't know how well the Trump team is doing at playing that game, But I suppose it's possible that if you say something is personal and you want to take it with you, like, let's game it out for somebody like Trump. It's a list of, I don't know, or it's information about the Iranian nuclear program, as we found out he was in possession of at some point. And he says, I'd like to keep this. I want to be able to show people on the dining down at the patio for dinner at Pervalago. This is how close we can, almost like this is the presidential version of the look what I almost stepped in. Here is information that shows that the Iranians were trying to make a nuclear weapon and I wasn't doing a very good job at preventing it. Look how close I came. Right? Whatever it is. And I'm sure that in his case, the claim will be, they came this close, but I stopped them. This is actually a record of what the progress that they made on this weapon while you were president, but whatever. Anyway, whatever it is. And he wants to show that around. Now, it's clearly a government document and a fairly sensitive one at that. But he says, in order to take it to Pervalago with me, I now declare it both declassified and personal property. The special master takes a look at it and says, well, this was, your imaginary declassification process doesn't work. And so that's not happening. It's still classified. And second of all, the idea of just declaring it personal property, that's not based on anything either. So my finding is that it is both classified still and governmental property and a presidential record. All right. Well, if that's the case, Your Honor, it should be shielded by executive privilege. Now, in many cases, like in the case we imagined where he was showing it around to people at Pervalago, that will tend to destroy executive privilege claims. Executive privilege is for documents that have a certain sensitivity and secrecy necessary for state business. That means you can't be showing it around to people willy-nilly, but you were showing it around to people willy-nilly. And usually when, in a normal case, normal legal case, if you're attempting, say, to claim there's attorney-client privilege in a document, but you can demonstrate, there's evidence that proves that you've been showing this document to people who are not your attorney, you would then say, well, that destroys the attorney-client privilege. It's now no longer closely held between you and your attorney. You show it to all sorts of people. We're not going to accept that privilege anymore. And it's not, now no longer protected. And so in a case where he was showing documents around or manipulating them and carrying them around, even if he wasn't showing them to people necessarily, if he was handling and reading the documents after his presidency when he was no longer authorized to be in possession of them, that too may have the effect of destroying executive privilege. But it's somewhat nuanced, I guess, in a way, but very simplistic in the way that the Trump team is arguing it. Anyway, plaintiff has indicated he asserts executive privilege only if the special master rejects his assertion that a document's personal and determines that it's presidential. That is a shell game, and the special master should not indulge it, DOJ argues. In a Saturday filing to the court, the DOJ also indicated that one batch of the documents under review included cover sheets for classified documents, even though the classified documents themselves were missing. We've heard about those, right? The DOJ is seeking to retain that collection of records, arguing that the other documents in the box, including those dated after Trump's term ended, indicate that he was handling the records after leaving office. Why would these confidential or classified records in classified record cover sheets, A, why would they be missing, for one thing, and B, why are they in the same box with documents created after you were out of office? It seems to indicate, doesn't prove definitively, but it tends to indicate that somebody, probably you, has been handling these documents in close proximity in time to your handling of these documents, which were created after your presidency. So it might be that after your presidency was over, you were handling the classified material and putting it in boxes with other stuff. Such evidence, the article concludes, would cut against any potential argument from Trump that he was unaware of what classified records were stored at his home, because you were moving them into new boxes with stuff created, documents created after you were out of office. And you couldn't have helped but notice that there were envelopes marked classified top secret all over them when you were putting them in the boxes. So it'll be very interesting. And of course, I guess he's free to argue at some point. I don't read things. I don't even know what letters mean. So, how did I know that these things were classified? I didn't even, or I didn't look in them. I don't know, whatever his argument might be. It's getting ridiculous. But I mean, it's always been ridiculous, but now they're spelling out for us exactly how ridiculous each step of the way is. All right. What about setting things up for a discussion with Joan later on? One of the things that might be of some interest to her is discussion of just what the hell is going to happen in this new Congress, given that, one, we still don't know exactly what the numbers are going to be, although it does look increasingly that like the Republicans will, in fact, have a majority on day one, maybe, in the House. Whether or not they'll be able to control it is actually a different question. And coincidentally, this morning I happened to see, let's see, what am I looking at here? Okay, something completely different now floating by via Twitter. But among this morning's things, I don't know, I got a mention in something here and I wasn't expecting it, but Marcy Wheeler this morning, considering what? The tweeting of Scott Wong, I guess we'll go through this whole chain of possession here. Scott Wong, senior congressional reporter for NBC News, tweeting, when is it, this morning? Yes, earlier this morning. Scoop. He's got a scoop. Representative Murdery Trader Green is at the heart of this scoop. MTG's worst fears could soon be coming true. I'm not certain what they are. Maybe it's a black person in her neighborhood or something like that. What is it? Don Bacon, Republican from Nebraska, tells NBC News he's willing to work with Dems to elect a moderate speaker if 218 Republicans can't agree on a candidate, is what he's saying. Okay, so the first party conference and caucus meetings for selecting leadership are taking place. Members are back in D.C., some, surely not all, are back in D.C. and they're conferencing/caucusing, depending on what they designate themselves, and trying to work out who will the party leaders be and what positions will there be on the various committees, et cetera, parceling that stuff out. And we've been over that process before, in years past. But what's going on? If Republicans take the majority in the House, normally they would be able to choose a speaker. But I mean, one, they may have a very, very narrow majority. Two, the speaker has to get an outright majority of the House. It's not, you can't be elected by a plurality, such that if there were 3 candidates for speaker and one candidate, the candidate got the most votes only amassed 217, at least of the members there, present and sworn anyway. But if you can, let's say for the sake of the argument and the numbers and the math, you can only get 200 votes together. That's not enough to become speaker. You need to put together an actual majority of the House, which ordinarily, when all 435 seats are duly filled, is 218. That can change, et cetera, But the threat here is that there would be defectors among Republicans who might jump ship if they could be offered the right candidate, which means another Republican. Really, effectively. Very little chance that Don Bacon or anybody else among the Republican conference would vote for a Democrat to take that seat unless it was an extraordinarily conservative Democrat who was giving them their personal assurance that they were going to sever ties with the Democratic caucus or whatever. But basically he's really holding the door open for a different Republican, say, other than McCarthy, or he might accept McCarthy just fine. If McCarthy refuses to bend the knee to the Freedom Caucus and Murdery Trader Green and her like, and give them what they want either in the rules package or whatever other concession they're looking for, and he says, I'll stand on my own merits. I mean, that's not a great play for him, but if he says it and they can put together 218 votes for him, then fine. He ends up being the speaker, even if Democrats join in voting for him just to frustrate the Freedom Caucus. I don't think that's a wise play. McCarthy's not very trustworthy. He's just not the kind of person that would ordinarily tempt a sane Democrat to cross the line. But there's a lot of mischief afoot is basically what's going on here. And Scott continues to tweet here. He's got a thread and he's connected an article to it, which is entitled, well, we'll just open it up so we can have a look at it. Conservatives warn McCarthy, you don't have the votes for speaker. So they're threatening him unless he, makes the certain concessions that they're demanding, and they'll withhold their votes. And so long as they're publicly willing to withhold their votes, yeah, the margins are close enough. I guess looks like the NBC News current projection for the House, give or take 3 seats in either direction, is 220 Republicans, 215 Democrats. So, well, the problem is plus or minus 3 could include 218 Democrats and 217 Republicans. I mean, that is within the range of plus or minus 3. But if they don't sweep and run the rest of the table, that number comes down. 220 Republicans could easily become 219 or 218. But beyond that, you no longer have the majority. So that's how narrow it is. It's funny the way that looks optically. 5-seat majority. That's bigger than we were talking about before. But it could easily, if it's not 5, it'll be 3 or 1. So anyway, it provided they fill all the seats. Anyway, so is this Scott Wong's own article? Yeah, Scott Wong with Kyle Stewart. Conservatives warn McCarthy you don't have the votes for speaker. Perhaps at the moment, given our time constraints, we'll just continue to read Scott Wong's tweet thread about this stuff rather than dive into the article, but might be worth diving into eventually. So first, the scoop that Murdery Trader Green's worst fears could be coming true. Don Bacon says he's willing to work with Dems to find a different, more moderate speaker. Bacon says, on why he's willing to work with Dems to elect a speaker if the GOP can't agree on a speaker. I do want the country to work and we need to govern. We can't sit neutral. We can't have total gridlock for 2 years. They can and they will. Pressed again that he would team up with Dems, Bacon replied, yes, but that's assuming we can't get to 218 beforehand. However, he added that a speaker, Liz Cheney, for instance, will never happen. So, and that would cause more defections among the Republicans than they'd be able to make up for with Democrats, I think. On the GOP side, there will be zero stomach for Cheney, Bacon said. Andy Biggs makes it official on Newsmax, says Scott Wong. He will take on McCarthy for Speaker of the House. Everybody thinks they can do it now. This is the everybody's just a tourist on January 6th guy running for Speaker, huh? On Bannon's War Room, Matt Gaetz mocks Murdery Trader Green, interestingly enough, for trusting McCarthy. Whenever or whatever Kevin has promised Marjorie Taylor Greene, I guarantee you this, at the first opportunity he will zap her faster than you can say Jewish space laser, Gates said. That's actually quite clever, and he's probably right. And, okay, interesting observation. And here's a tweet from Patriot Takes, I guess, with actual video of that statement being made. So let's see. Cliff Schechter weighing in here saying, D's, make some deals so that if you lose the House by 2 to 5 votes, you make Maria Elvira Salazar or Mike Fitzpatrick Speaker. Republicans likely don't have the votes for anyone. Some sane legislating could actually occur. And then somebody says, do you mean Brian Fitzpatrick? Mike Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania died a few years ago. So probably, yeah, I guess so. So anyway, this is what Scott Wong was talking about. And that grabbed Marcy's attention. And she said about all this, well, this was what people were missing. Right now, margins are 7. And the GOP leaders have long had a vote count problem. If McCarthy doesn't get 218, so that would be greater than 3 defections, that is, then Dems who can count votes will pitch someone who can get the approval of the middle 230 or so members of the House. Darwin, by the way, just now weighing in on this, saying this is a hell of a bank shot, but maybe Dems can work with the Nebraska Republican to install Liz Cheney as Speaker. But that part now probably reaching you that Bacon rules Liz Cheney out from the get-go. And there's enough Republicans just still bitter and angry at Liz Cheney that she would just be an initial no. So there'd have to be somebody else. But so, yeah, empty wheel theorizing that there's a significant, you could put together a working majority of about 230, she's guessing, members who would be willing to vote for a middle-of-the-road moderate. And I have difficulty believing that you can put together 230 anythings in this House. But anyway, somebody else chiming in here, Michael, saying the middle 230 of the House is probably, 205 Dems and 25 Republicans? And Marcy responds, good question. I'd love to see someone like me, Kagro X, me or David Neer, any of the two Davids here, come up with a list of 230 members of Congress who could be part of such a coalition. This was a good 2 hours ago, but I've been on the air for an hour and a half of that and have not been working on that list, and I don't have a great deal of interest in doing it, but that's okay because David Neer has. He tweets initial stab here and has some links, though this was just before a bunch of races were called last night, so it's not entirely clear that all 230 members he's thinking of as comprising this middle-of-the-road caucus, cross the aisle caucus, will actually be in Congress. He includes here his own tweet from, his own treatment, I guess, of some prior tweeting. Let me see exactly what he's doing here. Here, a tweet of his in which he's replying to someone else. Ben K, official, whoever Ben K is, the K not immediately at hand. At least 6 of these are in the New York media market and maybe parts of Pennsylvania too. So thank you to the New York Post and local TV. Truly an in-kind donation to the new House majority. What is going on here? David Neer being referenced in that tweet from Brian K, saying, not including uncalled races, these 11 Republicans will all sit in districts Biden would have carried. Okay, so those 11 Republicans sitting in a Biden-ish district are initially among the list of people, 230, so we got 220 to go here. But I guess these are the Republicans he's thinking of, and he doesn't need 230 such Republicans. We're looking for 25 or so, according to Mike's guess, to put it together. So which 25? Well, perhaps how about these 11 or so Republicans who are in Biden-leaning districts, but who have nonetheless won for Republicans. And he goes on to say Pennsylvania's first district is entirely in the Philly market, not in the New York border area, for whatever reason that came up. But okay. So what does he have to say? It's not entirely clear what that has to do with introing his initial. Okay, so his initial stab, I guess, is supposed to be these 11. And we might as well read down the list because that's available. They include, and again, this happens before the conclusion of the counting in each of those races, but he proposes New York's 4th District Republican Anthony D'Esposito as first on the list. We got to roll the music here. Mike Lawler of New York's 17th District, also in a Biden-leaning district here, where Biden polls 50% and up. Lori Chavez de Raymer in Oregon's 5th District. George Santos, New York 3. Don Bacon, of course, who floated this whole thing from Nebraska. Brian Fitzpatrick, Pennsylvania 1st District. Mark Molinaro, New York 19. Tom Kean Jr. in New Jersey 7th District, but he's pretty Trumpy, actually. We'll see. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. The music means we're back, and the good news is we're back with Joan McCarter. Hey, Joan, how are you?
I am fine. How are you this morning?
Well, okay. I'm reading through the list. I guess this came up this morning. People was beginning to speculate on whether or not there was going to be some shenanigans in selecting a speaker. And it's almost certain that there will be some shenanigans involved.
There will be shenanigans. That's yes. A guarantee.
No doubt about that.
Out.
Okay.
Between now, they have their initial meeting today and votes, and McCarthy will say, does he really have it? But it's not official until January when they come back.
Right. They'll make up their mind who they want to nominate. But that's
between now and then, gosh, a lot can happen.
Yeah. So, right. The process will be right. The Republicans will get together in their conference and, well, they might reach a conclusion, but then again, they might not, about, normally you would say, all right, well, who are we going to nominate? And again, under normal circumstances, you say, well, we'll nominate them and we have the votes. And so that person will be speaker, and you can start making preparations. That's literally where you get to start measuring the drapes, I guess, or at least selecting the color of the drapes is all they really allow you to do.
McCarthy's been measuring for weeks.
Yeah. So, he anticipates
with a string and a ruler.
He might really be doing that. True. And then, at the end, you'll find out, I don't mean to insult you, Mr. Speaker, but all the drapes are the same size. It's the color that you get to choose. And here's the swatches. And, that's it. I don't know why you were measuring. We're not building you new windows or anything. The windows stay the same. We know what the size is. So, I don't know. You could opt for no drapes, I guess. In which case, you didn't have to measure anything anyway. So, okay, you're wasting your time measuring things, but it's just a figure of speech anyway.
Yes.
So you should not have done that. He may actually be out there. I need a ruler. You don't. But ordinarily, right, they would get together, they'd decide who's going to be our nominee for speaker. We know how many people there are going to be in Congress, more of us than them. We'll all support him because that's what you do as a party, and he'll be the speaker. But in this case, we have a bunch of weirdos who say, I'm not going to vote for that person. I'm going to run myself. As it usually turns out, like 19, 20 different Republicans say, no, I'm the most popular person in the room.
Well, right now it seems like there's only one so far putting himself forward. That's Andy Biggs.
Yeah, but he's just a tourist, so it doesn't count.
Right. That's Kirsten Sinema's best buddy. Kirsten?
Yeah.
I don't know. Why they can't all agree on one name. Sinema's best buddy in the Arizona caucus,
is that
reportedly.
Right? That's weird. I mean, he's all right. Well, okay.
Anyway, he's the Freedom Caucus guy who they're putting forward.
Yes.
Jim Jordan has declined.
Okay. I mean, yeah, he's benefited greatly from the current leadership structure. They give him whatever he wants. He's got no reason to be upset.
Yeah. He really only wants to do the Judiciary Committee and have hearing after hearing after hearing and yell at people.
Yeah.
That's all that matters to Jim Jordan. He doesn't want leadership. He just wants to, have his show happen all the time.
Yeah, he might not even want the leadership of the committee. He just wants to be maybe one of the top ranking guys so he can yell early. But I don't know if he wants to do the work of organizing the hearings. But maybe. Maybe.
Well, no, I mean,
it's possible.
Well, he won't.
A staffer.
He's ranking on judiciary, right?
Yeah. I mean, but he's ranking everywhere, isn't he?
Depending on how this is also part of what they figure out between now and then is who gets those committee assignments.
Yes, and but he's like ranking on everywhere they were having yell at people hearings. They just put him on that committee and made him the ranking member. So yeah. Now people will say, oh, there's gavels involved. You can't give them all the Jim Jordan. So some of those will go away. Yes. And
speaking of, here comes Marjorie Taylor Greene. You were talking about her earlier. According to Harry Litman, the LA Times legal affairs columnist, she got Steve Scalise, who's going to be the number 2, the majority leader, whatever majority there is, to commit to investigating Nancy Pelosi and the Department of Justice for their treatment of January 6 rioters being held in the D.C. jail.
Okay.
So already we've got Greene demanding things and getting things out of leadership for her support. McCarthy's already promised that, of course, she's going to get her committee assignments back, possibly on the Oversight Committee.
Okay.
But again, this could depend on just how close of a margin of majority Republicans have. Right now, it's not looking like it's going to be a big one.
Yeah. And they'll have to press real hard. It's going to be interesting. I mean, Republicans, I'm sure, would press every advantage that they've got. But I mean, if it's like literally a 1-seat or 2-seat majority, there's not a great claim for stacking committees very heavily with Republicans. Though, if you have a majority, you can force that. And they probably will try to do that. And they'll need to do that because there'll be a bunch of crazy Republicans who want to be on, premier committees so that they can yell at people.
Right.
And there's just not that many seats to go around. And just thinking about Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, if she makes it back, and all the rest of them now they're in the quote unquote majority, but having to settle for workaday stuff. Like working on the small business committee,
Yeah.
Also,
and how welcoming are the real people on these committees going to be to having these people on them?
Yeah, that's still an open question, too. I mean, she's a very popular figure when it comes to fundraising and everything, but Marjorie Taylor Greene hasn't been on committees. And although all Republicans consider that to be a huge injustice, if you are a second-term Republican and you showed up and did the work of whatever committee, oversight committee last year, and you're looking to, move up a little bit in seniority, and Marjorie Taylor Greene shows up and says, I'm actually either senior to you or have just as much seniority, I should be deemed to have it, even though I didn't serve here last term. That's not my fault. It's the Democrats' fault. So you look like an unloyal Republican unless you just say, yeah, sure, you can cut in line. So will they say that? Well,
will they say that?
Backsies. You can have backsies.
Will there be enough Republicans like Don Bacon to have a little bit of a spine and say, look what just happened. We didn't get the red tsunami. We got I saw somebody talking about it as a pink tinkle. I like that.
Okay, that's good.
And really, do we want to spend the next 2 years with this spectacle? Is that going to help us in 2024 for real?
Yeah.
I
mean,
don't
you have
know
to
if
doubt
there
it.
are enough Republicans. They certainly haven't stood up yet. But now's their chance. So maybe. I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah, well, that would be unwise generally. But,
Yes.
it's certainly waiting on Republicans to do the right thing or to find the coalition that they like. Lots of speculation just before we came on. Marcy Wheeler, David Neer speculating on could you put together some sort of middle of the road-ish type coalition to install a moderate speaker. And he's working on it. But I'm like, well, one, if he's working on it, I won't because
Right.
forget it.
He knows all this stuff. The spreadsheets those guys keep are just...
But yeah, minus the spreadsheet, I will tell you, I mean, I'm sure he's figuring this. He's been asked this question. So if it were going to happen, it would probably look like this. But I'm pretty sure that he would also tell you, well, but what's your prediction? Oh, my prediction. No, they won't be able to do that.
No. Because McCarthy is not known for doing the right thing.
No, he's not. But does raise the question, how do they settle it?
If he promises enough people enough power, I think they can avert it. I might be, please let me be wrong because I would like to see.
I would love the chaos. It would be fun.
2 years of the House actually being able to do something. The chaos is fun in theory.
Yes.
The chaos in practice is, chaos.
Yeah, well, right.
And when is the government you're playing with?
Right. That's not so great. The like 2 weeks of chaos is okay. And for the headlines of they're eating their own, they can't govern, etc. But then eventually, the national debt issue comes up, and then you say, well, now you got to govern. So, and if you don't, all the value of all your assets and money disappear forever, maybe, possibly. That seems like a bad thing.
There's good news on the front of the national debt, looking like the before the election, everybody was sort of sanguine about, that's not going to be a huge priority in the lame duck. Right now, it's becoming a big priority in the lame duck. I don't know whether, Janet Yellen sat down with folks and said, hey, people, reality here, or what happened. But now pretty much the White House, Schumer and Pelosi are all on message saying, we're going to get this dealt with before we leave.
Okay. Well, that's good because it's been, it's been pointed out for a long time, and it would be dereliction of duty not to do it. And as much as they'd like to not do what, progressives say you should do, they have a good point, and they'll just claim, we knew this had to be done. We didn't have to hear it from you blog people.
You people didn't need to be yelling at us about this.
But you were, so you looked serious, and now you'll be listened to. Isn't that nice?
So it looks like that will be taken care of. They're talking, apparently in the meeting this morning, Pelosi mentioned that she's not at all opposed to doing one more reconciliation bill.
All right.
So,
what instructions do they have left?
That, of course, depends on the Senate, but we could see the House really trying to do some very big stuff. And we don't know what the Senate would do, but we do know that if we return Raphael Warnock on December 6th, then Schumer's got 51 votes to take to Joe Manchin to say, look, play nice.
Yeah. And I could see Joe Manchin, if he's looking for, if it really bothers him to do a reconciliation bill, he can look forward to 2 years of not having anyone to work with, and it prevents it from being used again, I guess. But he occasionally finds his Democratic roots and may say, all right, well, for one more thing that only lasts a couple of days, there's only a few days left of Democratic control of the House. Fine.
Yeah,
we'll do one more thing, but you got to throw in.
There's going to be a quid
something
pro quo
about coal
because it's Manchin, and they're already talking about it. The thing that is left over from before the election is permitting reform.
Yeah, okay.
For oil and gas leases, but for it to happen, is going to have to undergo some changes and is going to have the stamp of the House on it. And the House has said, well, okay, we're not unilaterally opposed to this. We're not completely opposed to this, but it's got to not be what you want. And it's got to make sure that, yes, renewables are included in this permitting process. That we make it a lot easier to do big wind solar projects. So
maybe he'll go for it. I mean,
so that's hanging out there in the background.
He does have a little leverage there, and you say, "I'm going to be here next week, and you're not."
And apparently, this is something I saw whispers of yesterday. Gabe said the whispers are getting louder today, trying to get Dream Act stuff done, potentially by reconciliation. You know, again, it all comes down to the House can do this. The House is likely to do this because we still have Democrats in the House, and if we get their reconciliation bill, they can lard it up with what they like.
Yeah.
There's still the reality of the Senate and Manchin and Sinema and the parliamentarian. Do they take this crisis averted and one more added to the Senate, provided one more is added to the Senate, and say, you know, you guys got to go along. Sinema, you're up for re-election in 2024, so it's time that you play with us. And just tell Manchin to take a hike, or we don't know. We don't know yet.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, we're always stuck with the wait and see on these things, but there's a lot of potential for a lot of different directions, and there will be there may be some agreement among this, you know, allegedly moderate caucus of Republicans that are supposed to emerge from the woodwork for the weird dream of electing a moderate speaker. Well, they may say, well, let's not leave the less we, or the more we leave undone, the more room there is for mischief and destruction by these idiots.
Well, and they can look at it and say, look how close it's going to be. We're going to have another situation where there's a Joe Manchin that can take everything hostage, and anything we do here doesn't matter anyway because of him. So do we want to give those types of people more power, or do we want to be that person and have a big coalition that says, you know, you're not doing anything without us? I got to say that a house full of moderate, not necessarily Manchin types because he's really a Republican, but, you know, people who are willing to use that position to moderate things. If you're looking at a Freedom Caucus running it, that's better.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything can potentially make sense given how crazy things can get. But yeah, it's very difficult to see, and it depends on individual personalities and what people are seeing from others across the table from them in private meetings. You know, do you trust this person? There's lots of reasons. You know, a lot of people have track records that you should or shouldn't trust, but a lot of others, I mean, there's a lot of votes out there that we don't have any idea what kind of person they are.
Right.
And then that whole makeup changes in a couple of weeks, and we don't know what kind of lessons do crazy people who are election deniers draw from winning a narrow race when everybody else who ran on their platform lost.
Right. And there are going to be quite a few of them joining the House GOP.
Yeah, and we're already seeing now in this parade of concessions that the true believers weren't actually true believers.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Yeah.
They're not going to be here, so we don't care, but what does that tell us about the people who were always lukewarm but signed on to the platform only to see the platform lose? They survived, but they were never really convinced in the first place. So maybe a lot of election denialism fades because it's not fashionable, you know, could always come back. It's not dead forever. Or, you know.
But what kind of people are they going to be? I mean, how many more Marjorie Taylor Greenes, Lauren Boeberts are we going to have? Are they going to be as vocal? Are they going to be as disruptive? Or are they just going to kind of keep their heads down and try to learn? It doesn't seem likely.
Yeah, ordinarily I would say they wouldn't work hard at learning anything. On the other hand, Marjorie Taylor Greene types also have a vested interest in making sure that no other ones grow up. I cut all of them off at the knees, or else I'm not the primary Marjorie Taylor Greene anymore. They say they want allies, but they want subservient allies.
Right.
Nobody can become as outspoken as her, or she'll kill him. So look out. And maybe really. I don't know.
Maybe really. Oh, here's an interesting question. Are there going to be enough Republican votes to take the metal detectors away from the doors?
I know, that's their big item. They have such a weird list of demands, and you know what
they have a
their
very
pet peeves
long list of demands, most of which involve making sure that whoever is speaker has very little power vis-a-vis the Freedom Caucus.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
So they're gonna, if McCarthy gets it, they are going to extract a great deal from him. That means he has no real serious power.
Yeah.
On committee assignments, on all sorts of things.
Yeah, and ordinarily they do.
Bringing back the motion to vacate the chair. The thing that they used to oust Boehner back in 2015.
Right. So, yeah, at any time, if they get their way on that, anytime he tells them, no, I think it's for the best if we, either don't have this vote, or don't allow this amendment or that amendment, they'll say, well, then if you don't, I'll make a motion to vacate the chair. And I guess that's supposed to be a real threat. I don't know. The list of demands, as Greg was reading it, the preliminary list of demands, I mean, it's internally contradictory in many ways, and doesn't make any sense. And I like the one that was, if they don't finish all of the appropriations bills by August 1st, then no more legislation is allowed, which I guess includes the bills that they haven't passed yet. Like, how do we do that?
As if the Senate doesn't exist and the Senate isn't actually having to do work and get these bills. It makes no sense at all. But,
I'm sure it's whoever's idea it was, that was their version of, well, we shouldn't, get paid or do anything if we can't take care of business.
Budget amendment of legislating. It makes no sense and is not practicable and probably won't happen.
Yeah,
possibly won't happen. I don't know.
But
these people are capable of doing just about anything, which again is why we have to get the debt ceiling taken care of before they take power.
That's really true.
The other problem is I just see 2 years of really nothing happening because on any given day, Democrats are going to have the majority.
Yeah, it certainly could happen. It just depends on who's got a cold today.
Yeah.
And since
also
Democrats took flu shots.
What is McCarthy really going to do about proxy voting?
They will. Yeah, I think maybe the outcome there is they say, all right, well, in order to get the 218 I need to be speaker, I will agree, if they still believe in this, I'll agree to get rid of proxy voting. And the plan here is we'll do it your way. We'll make me speaker. We'll try to hold votes the way you want. And then I'll pull some things from the floor. You'll get angry. I'll explain what's going on. You'll see the necessity of proxy voting. We'll bring it back, but with me as speaker. But, I'll promise to do things your way with the knowledge that they will fail, and we're going to come back and revisit this in 3 weeks when we can't do anything.
That's definitely possible.
It is. And I mean, it's only a question of how long will it take to convince the people who came in thinking, well, remember, I'm a no compromise person. Compromise is a dirty word for me. And I told all my constituents I'd never bend on this. And then I campaigned on something about proxy voting I didn't understand. How long will it take for that person to come around to, okay, here are some talking points that I can go back and explain why I changed my mind on everything. And I'll now vote this way and not vote to vacate the chair because somebody suggested this. So, yeah, I think that it's a question of what's the learning curve? How long does it take for new firebrand Republicans to realize, oh yeah, I have to go back home and say I changed my mind on it. And it's as long as it takes for somebody to say to them, your constituents don't remember that you promised something about proxy voting, and they don't care.
Proxy voting. They don't care.
Right. Go back and say you changed your mind. You know,
the only reason
House
term Republicans
limits
care is because Pelosi did it.
Yeah.
Well, and
that's right.
And it was COVID.
It's a very handy
tool.
tool.
COVID wasn't real and didn't exist, and
right.
You know.
Now, though, they can say it's not COVID that's keeping people out; it's the flu that's keeping people out, and that's real. Even though I don't get flu shots, which is why we're out. So. You know, there'll be a little bit of that. If it's a bad flu season, right, there'll be days, weeks on end when they're not really sure. Every day begins ordinarily with a vote on approving the previous day's journal, something no one ever pays any attention to except the whips, because that's the head count.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you'll all learn that. Just like 15 years ago, you all learned what the motion to recommit was. You're all going to learn about the approval of the journal all of a sudden.
Right.
So there will be weeks on end when they don't have enough people or they're just not sure. And then if they insist for a while, if you can get 10 people to sign on to an amendment, it has to be allowed on the floor. And the speaker will be delaying calling votes until they can settle that stuff. You got to drop your amendment. It's we don't have.
Well, and even before that, they've got this rule that they're wanting, the Freedom Caucus, and one of the things McCarthy apparently has agreed on, that anything that gets to the floor has already been voted on by the Republican conference and approved.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Is that going to happen? Can they even get past that hurdle?
Who knows? And they will have to change their counting rules.
If they manage that, how in the world are they going to get the necessary 2 to 3 Democrats they're probably going to need to actually pass it on the floor? Because, again, people are going to be absent.
Sometimes they're not even absent. They're there that day. They just are busy and miss a vote.
Yeah, it happens a lot. Any given day you look at a House vote and there's anywhere from 6 to a dozen people who were present but not on the floor, who just didn't make it to do the vote.
And if it's Tuesday, there's 20 of them.
Right. Or Thursday afternoon.
Yeah. Forget it. To prove that point, if you get the chance, if you ever look through, go to congress.gov and look at any roll call vote, and down at the bottom, there's the NV, not voting section. And, they're sick, they're out, they're at a cousin's wedding, they had a fundraiser, they tripped and fell down the stairs and are in the office of the attending physician getting a Band-Aid. They just missed the vote.
Yeah.
They don't want to vote. Kirsten Sinema doesn't want to vote. Doesn't show up. Whatever. They're not there. And in a 220 to 215 house, let alone 217, 218, the flu's going to get who it's going to get. And is there a Republican majority today or no? And if not, we can't bring anything, because Democrats would love it. Honestly, it'd probably change some votes. Like, we can defeat one of their bills, which isn't a bad bill. We can just hand them a chaos defeat. Yep, let's go do it.
Because they deserve it.
Yeah. Oh, now there's some motions to recommit opportunities.
Yes.
So
the motion to recommit could become fun again.
Right. Right. And so now I'm thinking, now the plan is I'm going to do some, what's the equivalent of free bird seed signs from Roadrunner, free chocolate cake from Mar-a-Lago in here, and then lock the door after 5 people go in. It's like that scene from Elizabeth. They lock the bishops in the basement. All right. Maybe not everyone remembers that one, but certainly free bird seed works.
Free bird seed.
It's going to be a hell of a ride, and it's a question of how quickly Republicans find a core of people not to elect a sane speaker, but to just make things work from day to day and commit to showing up, and it's going to be something. So lots of opportunities for mischief, too.
Lots of opportunities for mischief. So, yeah, let's do that reconciliation bill.
Yeah.
Pelosi and get some stuff done so that we can go into this for 2 years. And government shutdowns are going to be fun. But you know.
Yeah, well, all right.
If all they are left with is the possibility of shutting down the government, I'm not going to feel so bad. If that's the only real serious damage they can do, because, you know, they should have been curtailed enough by this election to realize that's probably not going to be a good idea. On the other hand,
they were beginning to learn that at one point.
They can do anything.
Okay, well, as long compared to the destruction of the worldwide economic structure, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah, we'll take it. Okay. Well, it will be a wild ride, and we can bet on how long it'll take for them to do something like this. But my guess is eventually they just get together. They'll have another meeting and fight with one another and say, "I don't like Kevin McCarthy. You don't like Kevin McCarthy, but." You know, we
got to do something.
Make him do that. And one of the big jobs of being speaker is to take our criticism, and we can all yell at him, and you'll enjoy that. Go ahead and do that. Run against him for a while. He don't care. So, all right. Well, thanks very much. We'll catch up with you after 1 week of orientation for the new members.
Right. But you know, last plug. Get out the vote and help Reverend Warnock. That's
true. That's what you need to do between now and then. Never forget that one, even though some people are trying to make you forget it. It's always important because you should want every seat in the Senate.
And 51 is a lot better than 50.
That is true. Okay, well, thanks very much, Joan. We'll catch up with you after another week of campaigning and be able to remind people of it even more. Although next Tuesday will be almost Thanksgiving, so we'll be busy at that point. Anyway, hopefully we'll be able to catch up. Thanks for coming by today.
You are most welcome.
Okay, Justice Putnam up next.